Wayne Walker. I'm the manager for the Future Forest. We're thinning the forest in the wildland-urban interface on the Apache Skidder. Once the task order from the Forest Service has been issued, then we move our equipment in. The first piece of equipment is a fellow buncher, and this machine cuts the tree down and bunches it up, grabs it while it's standing up, and it holds it, and then it'll cut another and another until its so-called mouth is full, and then it'll lay the trees down. The next machine would be a log skidder. The log skidder drags the small diameter trees to a in-the-woods processor. And there it is debarked, delimbed, and then chipped into a semi-truck.
I think one of the strengths of this project is it's community-based. We have about 31,000 acres that are in this contract, and we haven't had any challenges from the community. These are very small trees, and some of them do go to making conventional timber, like 2x4s, but some of it goes to smaller products like beams and trusses, railings and decking for outdoor uses, and then a lot of them are chipped up to make wood.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Joan Keegan. I'm the Assistant Executive Officer for the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and I'm also moderating the panels this morning. So you've all just seen a video about how there's work being done in Arizona to connect those dots of forest management and fuels reduction and community sustainability. And now our first panelists are going to tell you about some efforts that are going on in the Sierra Nevada to apply those same principles of collaboration and creativity to create projects that will also benefit their local communities economically, environmentally, and socially. So let me introduce them. Our first speaker is Calaveras County Supervisor Steve Walensky, who is a charter member and leader of Amador-Calaveras Consensus Project, as well as a board member, in fact, our vice chair of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy Board. Our next speaker, Brett Story, represents Placer County. Placer is doing some groundbreaking collaborative work to connect the dots of fire protection, forest health, and local community economic development with their Placer County Biomass Project. And finally, we will hear from Steve Frisch, the president of the Sierra Business Council, whose mission is to pioneer innovative projects and approaches that foster community vitality, environmental quality, economic prosperity, and social fairness in the Sierra Nevada. Mr. Frisch brings us the perspective of local and regional community-based organizations. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to give each of you a first question. You have 3 to 5 minutes to answer that first question. I know it's going to be tough, but try. And then we'll open it up, and I'll ask all of you questions, and that'll just be for discussion purposes for all of us. So, Steve, let's start with you. Please, in 3 to 5 minutes, give us a brief summary of the Amador-Calaveras Consensus, key objectives of the project, who's participating, what you've achieved, what obstacles you've encountered, how you hope to overcome them. Go.
Well, the Amador-Calaveras Consensus is essentially the antidote and opposite of what we've been doing in our region for the last 30 years. We had developed conflict over forests and watersheds to a high art form much litigated. And essentially the results had been economic devastation, social disintegration, and an economy that was essentially stalled. The consensus, as the name implies, has brought together at least 45 organizations, various interests in our region, including Native American tribal councils, environmental groups that are both local and national in scope, and had previously engaged in some of that litigation, the U.S. Forest Service, El Dorado and Stanislaus Forest, BLM, CAL FIRE, Fish and Game, job training organizations like Motherlode Job Training, poverty organizations, the community action agencies. We've had an enormous outpouring of support from even local contractors who had been much in the fracas before, but can see the possibility of changing our economy to something that can reach that triple bottom line in a non-conflictive way. Social, economic, and environmental interests being balanced and having an ability to carry out a forest economy without conflict with that goal. What we've done to date is just through the process opened up. We have a Native American crew that is out there today going into the National Forest, restoring Native American cultural sites. We have shipping crews that are doing forest thinning and fire safe work. Fire safe councils have been involved in this effort. BLM and U.S. Forest Service are stepping up and clearing NEPA for a much larger scale effort to do some restoration and stewardship work. We're very excited about the work going on in Arizona that people have seen and hope to replicate that in our much neglected region. For us, the bottom line is that our conflict has resulted in our own inability of our area to reach its own goals, and we've decided to put down the cudgels and get to work. Obstacles. I knew there was one part left. The obstacles that we face are that we have, essentially in our area, all the mills have been shut down. We have very little infrastructure, and as I suggested before, the workforce situation is marginal. We've got to gear ourselves back up for this. It's almost like putting Humpty Dumpty together after it fell off the wall. The pieces, we have to connect these dots. We have to put our communities back together and get this very exciting project out into the field in a much larger scale. Right now it's 20, 25 people. We expect with the cogen facility that's going online, Vista Biomass and Ione, that will become an basis for it that could sustain work out in the forest and restoration of watersheds for some time to come and put at least 150 people back to work.
Great. Okay. Your turn, Brett.
Okay.
Please tell us a little bit about the Placer County Biomass Project, what the overall benefits to the county have been, what sort of obstacles you've encountered, and how you've overcome them.
Sure. Thank you. First of all, like Supervisor Walensky, we have some supervisors that are very forward-thinking in our district, and they put together a proposal to have a biomass program to take a look at how we can reduce catastrophic fire, what to do with the waste that comes off those forests, take a look at how we can change the mentality of burning that waste, and look at their development that could go on in that area. So they hired me to do this easy thing, which is to take all those things on. But quite frankly, we have a lot of partners in it, and that's what makes it work. The United States Forest Service, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, CAL FIRE, a lot of state and federal agencies are all participating in what we put together, which is a number of projects and a number of programs. And we go from different levels. For example, we implemented very quickly just a simple, we call a Biomass Box Program, where we'll put a box, we'll meet with a homeowners association or a fire safe council that's doing some work. We'll provide them boxes to put the material in where it would have been burned in the past and put emissions into the air. We now take that, grind it up, haul it off to energy facilities, some of which are in our county, some of which aren't. But the idea is to change the culture of burning where possible. Mm-hmm. Similarly with the Forest Service. Obviously the forest should burn in certain circumstances. It's good for the environment. But there are cases where there are numerous piles. And in our county, which is about half forest, much like everyone's county that's on this Webposium today, there's a number of leftover piles. So we decided to meet and become team members. And I think we've done a pretty good thing just short of what you saw in the video, which is the Forest Service contributes a little bit of money to where they used to burn the pile. They contributed to the money we have, which is grant money. We go and take the highest risk fire areas that are near communities, grind that material, haul it off to make clean energy out of, and thereby reducing that. Now, long term, we think that can work, and we think that can work in a couple of ways. One is that, and this leads into some of our projects. One is to actually build a public-private partnership for a cogen facility, much like Steve talked about. And we're taking the simplest area possible, Lake Tahoe, and trying to put one in there. But the reason we're doing that, quite frankly, is because it does have to withstand the most environmental issues in our region. We think we can do it. We've had very good local support to date. Some of the environmental groups are on board. We're taking their input. We're trying to make this thing work. But we believe that if we can get that to work there, and we're sizing it, by the way, based on what the needs of the 30 miles around it are. We're not looking at building a huge power plant. We're looking at a very small, a 1 to 2 megawatt power plant, because that's what the data is telling us about, which is available economic material and which the infrastructure currently there can handle. We've got the people that can take care of that. We're putting them back to work. We see that as happening throughout our county and others, building smaller plants to take into account what's in each region and producing it in electricity today, but the future it could be alcohol-based fuel. Other programs we're moving forward with now, and Steve is going to talk a little bit about this from his perspective. We are teaming with our Air Pollution Control District, and we've actually moved forward with a carbon protocol, which is like the ones you've been hearing about down at the state, only ours is very specific. It takes the biomass that is taken from these, that's going to be created into energy, and allows for a carbon credit or offset to be taken from that, where it displaces fossil fuel only, and where it's waste material only. In other words, you can't go tear down a bunch of forests to create biomass to get this. So we're trying to work within the rules of what everyone in our communities want to do. We had the California Board of Forestry accept it, adopt it. The next step is to go to the Air Resources Board of the state, and we hope to have a project that will allow people in policy positions to see what works on the ground with all of our projects, because we're looking at it from economics as well. That way they'll have a database of information that when cap and trade and other laws come into place, they'll have some on-the-ground projects to take a look at, and hopefully they'll take the lessons learned that we've had and they'll craft a program that'll work for all of the Sierras. And that way it keeps the money local, and it keeps the even though carbon is a global, the air emissions, which will be reduced because of this, will be the local air emissions, and people will it'll be healthier, it'll help the watersheds more. So those are the kind of projects we're working with.
Wonderful. Steve, your group the Sierra Business Council has been involved in the development of some carbon market projects in the Sierra Nevada. So why don't you describe your experiences with those efforts, what you see as the primary benefits of the projects, what sort of obstacles you've seen, how you plan on overcoming those.
Great, thank you, Joan. Well, the Sierra Business Council has been working through a program called the Sierra Nevada Carbon Cooperative to try to link private landowners who are interested in participating in the emerging carbon markets for forest carbon sequestration, and to help them develop projects. And really we've been tracking the development of the California Forest protocols through the Climate Action Registry for the last 3 years. As many of you know, there's a new version of the forest protocols out that were approved last September, or a month ago, by the California Air Resources Board. So we've been trying to connect landowners with the tools and the resources in order to develop projects. And we've been studying model forest carbon projects around the state of California and across the country in order to try to bring some of those approaches to California forests. We have worked on the development of 2 forest carbon sequestration projects. Neither of them are certified yet, and actually it's entirely possible that they may not be. Really, our motivation in this was to begin to develop the tools for the Sierra Nevada. But the projects are really relatively complex in structure, so bringing these tools to private landowners, I think, is incredibly important, and finding ways to finance the startup of carbon projects in the Sierra Nevada so private landowners can participate in this effort. Developed projects generally require a baseline study or report that measures the amount of carbon that is already in the carbon pools on the property. And once you've inventoried carbon pools, you need to develop a management plan for the forest, which is based on the existing California regulatory environment. And then you need to prove additional carbon stored on the property. So they're relatively complex projects that require a decent amount of capital investment up front. And one of the critical pieces of it also is showing the permanence of the carbon that's going to be stored. If you can show all of these things, you can develop essentially the certification and then the registration necessary to sell carbon credits in the private marketplace, which we think has tremendous benefit to Sierra Nevada communities. First, it brings all of the co-benefits with the forest management, improved fish and wildlife habitat, scenic values, local job creation, economic benefit in the local community, putting local foresters and land managers back to work, small diameter timber, as the Forest Service was talking about, the development also of biomass feedstock that can begin to act as kind of a third leg in this stool here. You can have forest stewardship contracting on federal lands. You can have biomass feedstock coming from private lands, and that helps biomass utilization work more effectively. And then it has tremendous economic benefit to the landowner as well. Essentially, it provides landowners with a new set of resources to help them manage their land. And they can still, in some cases, remain in small diameter or in some form of timber production. There are significant impediments and obstacles to overcome. The markets are still emerging. At this point, it's a voluntary market in California. It will be a mandatory market by about 2012. We're tracking the development of the Waxman-Markey legislation as well, which passed the U.S. House of Representatives this year, but has not passed the Senate yet. And when that occurs, there will likely be a regulatory driver to help drive the emergence of the carbon markets. Ultimately, our objective, and we think what would really provide tremendous benefit in Sierra Nevada communities, would be to give landowners the ability to kind of manage land using a layer cake approach. If they're interested in doing conservation easements and using that as one tool, they can. You might layer on top of that water quality benefits, and layer on top of that carbon sequestration benefits and the sales of credits, or layer on top of that biomass utilization. And by providing this suite of tools, you provide a mechanism for private landowners to manage forests, to improve economic vitality, and reduce the risk of wildfire, and generate renewable energy. I can think of nothing better for the Sierra Nevada than a long-term outcome like that.
Great. So obviously one of the things that's really important in all of these efforts is getting people to the table, especially those people who have had maybe some issues with how things have been done in the past. So how do you get people to the table? And once you get them to the table, how do you keep them at the table?
Well, I can tell you how we started. In 2004, we began a process of community review and pulling people together. I called a meeting after my election of Native American tribal councils, which hadn't been getting along even among themselves, former loggers and timber workers and environmental groups. I really didn't tell any of them who else was invited, but upon getting into the room, there was a lot of suspicious looks and people kind of wondering what the heck this was about. But what came out of it was a discussion about, was anybody happy with the circumstances? Were environmentalists happy about the condition of the forest? Were the loggers and former mill workers happy with unemployment? Was the Native American situation recovered from genocide, let alone prospering in our communities? And what were the relations between us that kept us from getting to what we all recognize, which is we love the place. The Sierra is about the best place in the world to live. And yet we've been fighting one another for so long that people had lost track of the threads that hold our communities together, and that we'd lost a lot of the wonders, amidst the physical wonders of the Sierra, we had lost our sense of community. We called it the biggest losers club, actually, when it started. But in the end, we called ourselves CHIPS, Calaveras Healthy Impact Product Solutions, and decided that we agreed on 90% of the issues, and that it was really only old growth forests, which had been nearly wiped out in our area anyway, where the biggest disputes were occurring. When we realized that we had that 90% agreement, we got to work on it, and that is ultimately with the help of the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, which I think played a key role and cannot be underestimated in terms of the impact on our area, led the development of the consensus project that came out of the CHIPS effort. And to me, it was leadership, it was the recognition that we had bottomed out, we had nothing to lose, and that trying something new might very well benefit us better than holding on to our fratricidal traditions.
I think that issue of building trust in the community is absolutely critical. That by bringing diverse groups of people together, by providing a forum for them to really honestly vet their issues, which means we have to learn to listen to each other better. And that includes listening to people who often we disagree with, but we can learn a lot from, is really the critical aspect of all of these projects. For us, it was a lot of one-on-one reach with landowners who are, not necessarily accustomed to participating in consensus-based or large public processes. They really want the kitchen table conversation. And you can't be afraid to have that kitchen table conversation with someone who might not think the way you do to begin with. You do find that 90% of our values are in common, and you begin to organize projects around what you have in common, which I think is critical.
And I would just add, obviously you invite them. Maybe a different tack we took is we didn't invite everybody at the beginning because ours wasn't really as focused as that. But what we did find out was, like they both said, is you have some things in common. You focus on those. With the Forest Service, they didn't want to burn the material. They didn't want the stuff to go in the air. Neither did we. We had something in common. We put together just some basic principles of how we could fund this in a different way. Went forward with it. People started hearing about it. Luckily, we've been working with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, able to reach, showing with real scientific information and statistical economic information how good a value that is. And we've put that out there. We've asked for input back. Our project in Lake Tahoe, where we've gone through the technologies that we're going to look at, what happens with the air, the water, all of the environmental review impacts. I share that data with environmental groups, with local agencies, because I want their feedback, because the last thing we want is to end up where we all were 20 years ago. So it's going to shape the projects differently, but you're going to have an outcome that is a consensus, to use your team's work, that everyone can, if you can buy into 90% of it, I think you can make this work. We've been very successful. We have a U.S. Senator who's very impressed with what I think all of us are doing. Senator Dianne Feinstein, she's helped fund some of the work we're all doing. And I think when you have that, ours happened to start with Congressman John Doolittle and Senator Feinstein. Talk about a pair that probably didn't talk much, but on these issues they both agreed that this is the right thing to do. The Sierras are our lungs of the state. They're our veins of blood, essentially. With all the water, we've got to do that. And I think that's what our projects are trying to be about.
And I think in keeping people at the table, that issue of creating metrics around economic, social, and environmental benefit and proving that you are really looking at all three at the time is absolutely critical. That's what holds many of these efforts together, is that you can show the economic data, that this is really bringing jobs to the community and is helping the bottom line. At the same time, it's improving the environment.
Right. I just add that all of the reports that we've done are available to anyone. They're all public domain, and I've given them all to the people who ask, but certainly through the Sierra Nevada Conservancy we can make sure if any individual groups are interested in what we've done, and you've got some good work you're doing there too, as you do. That's, I think, valuable, that people don't have to relearn things. Yeah, don't make the mistakes we made.
Let's talk about economics a little bit more, because there's an economic component to all of your projects, both costs and benefits. How do you ensure that that economic component is sustainable over time?
Well, we have to think bigger ways. What's going on in Arizona is really a good template for the Sierras. They're talking about working with 1 million acres over long periods of time. Most of the ways that the forest economy has developed over the years is a boom-bust basis. We should have learned that from the gold rush. That 8 years of boom, 100 years of bust. In timber, it was maybe 40 years, and now we're completely funded. To think about the area, you can't think about just your backyard. You have to think about it as a region. You have to take a look at all the different pieces, and we've mentioned them. There's air quality issues, there's climate issues, there's sequestration, there's water issues, there are sick forests that have become as much a hazard as an asset. We have fire, catastrophic fire, which we've experienced a number of times in our county. All of these things need to be integrated. The approaches to them need to be integrated for it to be economic, because there's no single source of money. The other piece that's so important economically is that the people who are downstream water users and use the natural resources of the Sierra as well as the recreational need to make a greater investment. We only have 23% of the population. The people who actually benefit from our resources are getting pretty cheap water and not reinvesting in their own watershed. To me, the relationship between people in the Sierra and the people who are the downstream users needs to be ginned up significantly in order to have any hope of sustainability. They'll be using the power that we'll be creating in our cogen plants. What are they going to pay for that? Is it really going to help reset our approach to watershed management? Are we going to steward our area as a partnership? Or are they simply going to do resource extraction on an ongoing basis until it's used up and until the planet's pretty much history? Jim was right when he talks about the need to think about the future. Are our kids going to look back on this moment where we have a chance to get it right and ask, how could we possibly have failed? Or will they be celebrating the things that we decided to do here in the Sierra in the coming years?
Steve's talking about policy level issues that we have to solve, and I agree with you on our policy lead. We're sort of taking the on-the-ground approach. What we're doing, we're looking at our biomass operations, for example. We study every one of our projects, and we look at removing the material from the wood. We actually work with our local contractors that we hire. We bring in the Forest Service and others who've been doing research on how to get better at that. And we try different things out, and we look at the economics of those. We look at the economics of actually moving the material to a plant. We look at the plants to look at technology. How can that be done? The idea being you need to lower the cost of operations in the woods, make them more efficient. So not necessarily lowering, but make them more efficient so you can move more material with the same people. You need to take a look at driving less for a number of reasons. You obviously don't want trucks on the road that long. But from an economic basis, you look at the cost of fuel, which, not this past summer, the one before, was huge so far that people lost a lot of money in a lot of different ways. When if you have closer in range in what you're delivering, you're going to save money that way. So we're looking at those pieces of trying to understand how to make all of those factors more economic so that the on-the-ground contractors will have a way to make money. Now, what we've found to date is there's, the difference between what it costs you to bring the material to the plant versus what the plant's going to actually pay for it, and a lot of that's regulated from the cost of energy. There may still be a gap. There probably is still a gap, and that's why we look at this carbon piece, which is what launched us to work with our air pollution control district into the carbon. If we can look at a small supplement of carbon that the landowner can sell and help pay for that biomass operation suddenly can put people back to work. We can clean up our forests and our watersheds. We can make green electricity that's going to displace fossil fuel. So we're getting that, I think you call it a triple bottom line, which is an excellent point. But again, we look at each of our reports. Some places it works great. The Tahoe National Forest, where it's easier access, there's more material, it's a much cheaper price. We just finished a project in the Lake Tahoe Basin where the restrictions were a little tougher, not as much off-road, had to use more hand crews. The economics there aren't so good. But what we're doing is we're going to take that data to the people in the basin, the community there, and say, here's what you've got. If you want more of this cleaned up, it's going to cost a little more, or some of the regulations need to be modified. Again, finding that 90% curve where everybody can agree. There are pieces of equipment now that don't do damage to the ground that can remove the material. So we need to, I think, take a fresh look at that and get the consensus to say, maybe if we put a little bit more equipment on the land, those costs come down. We can do more in this area of cleaning up the forest, making energy, and get to that triple bottom line. So it's a tall policy-level economics, and it's down to the how can I make, that contractor that's in the field keep his job for the next 20, 30, 50 years.
I think that issue that it needs to scale from the essentially on-the-ground individual project approach is absolutely critical to long-term economic sustainability. Steve alluded to the extraction of resources from the Sierra Nevada, and when you think about our history with gold, water, and timber, outside influences have really used those resources to build wealth. What we need to start looking at is the ecosystem services that we're providing from within the region and figure out how to build wealth in our region, good jobs and benefits and other things that go along with that from those resources. And only by scaling from the small to the regional can you really do that. And I'll give you just two examples of things that could be done that I think would be absolutely critical. As California enters the carbon market, we should be looking at linking California carbon emitters to projects within our own state. It will help build our local economy. It will help solve some of our bigger term budget problems and create local employment. So, really we should be looking at trying to link the emissions in the major urban centers to the places where we can store carbon in the Sierra Nevada that will help provide watershed restoration, forest restoration, and all of these other benefits. The second example would be we need to start working on developing local timber markets. It is unsustainable for us to lose the timber economy in the Sierra Nevada. I think the old debate of should we cut old growth, really I think there's general consensus now that we don't want to do that. But what we do need to start doing is buying our own product again. We need to start linking our local economies back together so that I can buy wood from the Sierra Nevada and I can use that, and it puts people in my own community to work. And that scalability from the individual project to the regional approach is the way you get there. That's how you get long-term economic sustainability.
And there's another aspect to this which we haven't discussed a whole lot, but the diversity of the forest economy matters. There's boom and bust in the housing market, and that's what's really guided our timber practices over the years. And all the other factors combined don't come anywhere near to the level of influence of that market. But there's so many. This motto is actually doing good with wood. There's 100 different things you can do with wood. And the question is, can you develop local economies that are diverse enough so that they can move in the direction of markets, be flexible and using the same skills and the same equipment and the same personnel, be able to move across the different aspects of that market. And that's what you develop at a local
level. Get to those social benefits that we need in our communities. We need to rebuild our communities based on the resources we have. And what do we have more of than anything else?
Water, trees, wildlife, people. Not so much, but that's okay. We're helping everybody else.
All right. So if you had to offer advice to others who were thinking about undertaking projects similar to yours, what would it be?
Have courage. It's not easy to do something that departs from history and tradition. But if you go far enough back, you can see the traditions of the Sierra are a great stewardship by, in our area, the Miwok community. You can see that we have great communities and a great connection with one another. And we live in a place that's worth defending. So having courage in its defense and having a strategy that may have to break some new ground, do some new economies. We're really doing economic conversion here. And I think it is the courage to trust one another. It's the courage to break through old paradigms. It's the courage to include even the people who used to be the folks you fought with in court or down at the landfill or wherever else you were holding your debates in the bars and places throughout our communities. Have the courage to overcome that and build something new and worthwhile and sustainable.
Yeah, and I think you have to reach out too. If you can't solve it where if you have some trepidation about getting with that person that you've had a lawsuit with, there are other people. Your organization, for example, has done a great job linking a lot of people together and bringing them to the table. And again, it goes back to the trust thing. I think you'll find that particularly in this area, that being the people, all people want to save the forests, and all people want water, and we'd like a number of alternatives to power, which all of these things work to. We've had, for example, where we'll put a position paper out on something, and we'll see where a national level person thinks 180 degrees opposite. We'll actually reach out. We may do it through the Forest Service or the California Energy Commission or Sierra Nevada Conservancy with, hey, have you looked at what we've done? We'd like to look at more of what you can. We see your data, you can see ours. And all of a sudden you start breaking down, it was an interpretation difference or it was a policy difference. So then you can talk about it, and even if you can't change that person's mind, I think both sides learn from it. And I think that's where we're going to start getting solutions, is that kind of method of operations.
I think we have a like-minded panel here. Vision, courage, patience, incredible patience. It takes time, and you need to be in it for the long haul. And leadership. And the leadership exhibited in our communities in the Sierra Nevada is really quite remarkable. We need leaders to step forward and have the vision, the courage, and the patience to do this work. And the Conservancy has played an incredibly important role in helping to empower that. But ultimately, it is the people on the ground that are going to work on these projects at the local level that need to have that vision, courage, and patience. They need to take up kind of the flag and make these projects work. And they can work in our region, and that's how we can rebuild our economy.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. What have been the key impediments to on-the-ground action, and how have you overcome those? How can others overcome them?
I think one of the biggest impediments in our area has been a history of a political dynamic that actually uses wedges to divide pieces of our community, that people actually benefited electorally from some of the disputes that we had, until you have a politics that actually seeks to bring people together across those lines. You're not going to make a lot of progress. We've talked a lot about that in this panel. So part of it is political maturity. Part of it also is moving beyond the sense of, many people came to the Sierra. Well, I like to say in our county, if you put any two foothill folks together in a room, you're going to have three heartfelt and well-argued positions. We tend to be iconoclastic, individualistic, and yet, even with that as part of our culture, we have these communities that are tight. We have mutual aid in our fire departments. We have, whenever there's a storm that knocks power out, we're all out there taking care of one another. And I think there's a politics to that, too. And while we can be rugged individuals, we also have to have a sense of region and again, a sense of mission for that region that requires us to work together even across those iconoclastic lines. And so I would say our politics needs to be, well, let me add one other part of our politics. We have in the Sierra enough people to have assembly, senate, and congressional districts that are actually Sierra-based, but they have to go north-south. Instead, our political parties really have agreed to have these districts all be suburban-dominated. So where is the voice of the Sierra politically? And can we redraw districts that really give a common area, a common voice, and an ability to represent its interests effectively in relation to the rest of California? So I'd say our biggest impediment would be the way we've drawn ourselves up. And we can overcome that. And then reach the kind of partnerships that will result in the kind of investments that we long for, but find impossible to achieve.
From my perspective, I would say it's, probably bureaucracy, and it's not just associated with government organizations. Most of my career was in business. I've only been in government 3 years. Luckily, I'm a lousy bureaucrat. My bosses will tell you that. But I think what happens is people take into account what they've been doing for so long that they're not always willing to look outside the box, as common term. But our group of people try to look at it as what's the solution, not what's the problem, and then let's go towards the solution. And I think people generally will work through the problem better. So it's just reversing rather than all of the paperwork you're used to doing. What's the solution, and then take a look back. How do I get to that solution? And there, again, has to be some courage. In my organization, that's easy for me because I don't want to be a bureaucrat. So I'll go around it whenever I can. But, I mean, it's there for a reason, to make sure you're doing the right thing. But you have to find people within each organization, whether that's an environmental group, a county supervisor, a business, or whatever, that's willing to go back to their organization and say, you know, we used to do it that way. How about if we do it this way? We can cut 6 months off this process, or 3 months, or $100,000. And the project itself was only going to cost $200,000. And that's where you start getting creative about how to provide that solution. So that's what we try to focus on. Haven't always been, I mean, it took us a long time to get that contract with the Forest Service. And I love the Forest Service, but it was due to both their bureaucracy and mine. Now that we have one, we're looking at ways to streamline that for the future, kind of like what Randy Moore started out talking about, of, you know, what happened with the Stewardship Project or anything like that. But I think that's how you solve those.
I hate to end on impediments because I think every impediment is an opportunity for innovation, quite frankly. That obstacles are put in our way so we can find the new creative way to overcome them, quite frankly. And that's the mindset I think we need to bring to it. But I think in the Sierra Nevada, frankly, in the last 5 years, I've seen so much tremendous improvement in the ability of our communities to get together and really begin to overcome these obstacles, that the impediment I see now is that we're ready and we don't have the resources and the capacity, quite frankly. I mean, our communities are working better together now than they ever have. And the thing that's an impediment now is the national economy, the need for reform at the state level, resources for agencies like the Sierra Nevada Conservancy to invest in these community efforts. Those are the impediments now that we've largely overcome conflict in our communities and are learning every day how to do that better and better. And what we need now is investments in resources, capacity, and the ability to actually do the projects. And I think that's a real opportunity for innovation. Let's go out and raise the capacity and the investment dollars that we need to bring into the region.
Steve mentions the last 5 years in overcoming many of our differences, which is true. And I wonder whether it's mere coincidence that this is the 5th anniversary of the existence of Sierra Nevada Conservancy. I think it's, for my thoughts, this has been a wonderful addition to the Sierra equation and has made a lot of us have to rethink our way of looking at our small places on a more regional basis, and that's overcome a lot of our differences already. So thank you, Sierra Nevada Conservancy, for all of that. And even holding these kinds of events is a part of that.
Is there anything I didn't ask you? Is there anything you're dying to talk about that you didn't get a chance to talk about that you think is a key to the success of these projects?
I just covered mine.
Okay.
Let's keep moving forward with these and others. I think don't give up on anything.
And keep coming up with the great projects and doing our communities.
And for people who make funding decisions, put the resources into the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, into the projects that have been spawned from it, and keep it going for more than a year or two at a time, and never interrupt it again.
That's a great message from our legislators who are drafting water bond language right now.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was wonderful, and we look forward to hearing more about the success of all of your projects in the future. We know they're works in progress, but we know great things are going to happen.